Hey, folks, welcome to another episode of the California Clays podcast. I'm Henning Matthew. On today's episode, I had the pleasure of interviewing Ed Solomons. Many of you know him from his many videos he's done for TGS, ShotKam, and Schoffel Country. You can find them all on YouTube. And if you don't know Ed, he is a very accomplished shooter who's been shooting for the past 27 years and has also been a sought-after international clay shooting coach since 2015. Since winning the 2014 World FITASC, Ed has turned his attention to coaching shooters of various levels, from club shooters to world champions. We discussed Ed's approach to shooting and coaching. We also discussed the evolution of clay target shooting in the UK, his 2014 World FITASC victory, and his eyewear business with friend and sports vision doctor Ed Lyons. Ed is a great ambassador for the sport and just an overall good dude. I really enjoyed this interview, and I hope you do too. Let's jump right in. Hey, Ed, thank you for joining me on the California Clays podcast. Really appreciate it.
Absolute pleasure, man. Thank you very much for having me.
Hey, so you were just mentioning to me that you were in Germany, you were at the Krieghoff factory. Can you tell us a little bit about what you were doing out there?
Yeah, I got back. I actually got back about 1:30 this morning. I was over with a customer and a friend of mine doing a custom gun build, which is going to look absolutely epic. So yeah, we were just going over, doing the stock fit, picking the wood, testing it out on the indoor shooting range, which is pretty cool. I'm sure you've seen it on YouTube. And yeah, back to a day of adulting before starting coaching again tomorrow.
How many times have you been to the factory now?
Oh, I don't know. Probably double figures, I should think.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an easy double figures. Whether it's for just for myself or taking guys over there. So yeah, it's always a really good fun trip. If you ever, I know it's difficult, obviously being in the States, but if you ever get the opportunity to go over and have a look around, I can't recommend it enough. The people there are fantastic, but the product, as you know, is world class and it's a great experience. So two thumbs up from me.
No, I definitely would love to do that. And I've watched the TGS factory tour that you did with Johnny, and I've watched Lloyd's videos as well a number of times before I ended up getting my Krieghoff K80 parkour. And it looks like a great place. Like I definitely want to go there. Eventually, when I get an engraved receiver, I think that's something that I'll do. But
It's worth it. I mean, I know it's a long way for you guys to come, obviously, but the product is fantastic, as you know, and the people are just as good. So yeah,
yeah.
absolutely can't recommend it enough.
I think it's just one of those experiences too. If you're a serious competitor or just even a serious gun collector, it's just one of those things that you should do, right? Just like the Parazzi tour or the even the other guns, Beretta, going to Beretta. I think going
Sure.
to your guns manufacturer and going through that experience, I think is a pretty awesome thing for a shooter to go through.
Yeah, people buy into brands, right? And if you say whether it's Beretta, whether it's Parazzi, whether it's Krieghoff, if that's the tool that you've chosen to go and see it built from scratch, I think is fantastic. And
Yeah.
you just get you get a new sort of new level of respect for the gun and the product. Yeah, 100%.
Well, man, I've watched a lot of your videos over the I guess years now it's been, right? You've done
Yep.
a lot of good stuff online, and you've got a fan base out here from folks that I've talked to, people that have watched the videos, people that I know that have bought Krieghoff after watching some of the stuff. So I really wanted to interview you because I just wanted to kind of get a download on your experience as a clay shooter, as a coach. You've done a lot of things. You're a great communicator in terms of clay shooting. I think
Thank you
one of
very
the
much.
one of the good ones out there. So if you don't mind, let's get started with your background and kind of how you got into clay shooting. I always like to kind of
Sure.
understand everybody's story because everybody kind of has a
Yep.
unique perspective on that. Would you mind talking about how you started?
Yeah, absolutely. So I first picked a gun up, I think I was 13. So I had when I was younger, had quite some sort of ongoing, but started off having some pretty serious digestive issues. I had a condition called ulcerative colitis, which kind of messes your guts up on a pretty industrial scale. So that kind of meant for me I couldn't do a lot of the stuff that I wanted to be doing, which was like rugby and running around and just doing general cool sporty kid stuff. Um, but indirectly, it turned out to be a fantastic advantage to me because in and out of hospital trips, I got invited pretty much on like a sympathy a sympathy trip through one of my dad's friends to come and shoot clays, which I'd never done before, and I'd never shot other than shooting an air gun in the garden with my granddad when I was, probably 8 or 9. I'd never done anything. So someone says, "Do you want to come and have a go with a shotgun?" You're a 12, 13-year-old kid. You're like, "Yeah, 100% I do." And that was a guy called, very sadly passed away now, a friend of dad's called Mick Green, who was just a club level shooter. But obviously at the time you think they're like the next coming of Digweed. But super, super nice guy. He would have been probably in his 60s, I guess, when he sort of took me out. And he was by his own admission, he wasn't a coach. He was just a guy taking someone out for a shot. So I was left-handed. I was about probably 5 foot tall, and at the time, I don't know, 75, 80 pounds because I was in a pretty bad state. I was given his 30-inch Beretta and some 28-gram shells, and just had a go at it. And
Mhm.
pretty much from the first time I pulled the trigger, I was like, "Yeah, this is going to be something I want to do now." I was absolutely, absolutely hooked on it. Just last peg of skeet, shooting, going away in an incomer, and yeah, that was it for me. From then on, it was pretty clear that was what I wanted to do.
So you did skeet was your first game.
Yeah, my first introduction to shooting anything was literally peg 7 on English skeet. So you just got the straight away and a almost straight incoming target. Shot 25 around it, or a box of 25, came away from it absolutely smashed to pieces. I mean, like fucking black and blue all around here. But it was fantastic for me. I've never had such enjoyment getting beaten up in my life. And he's like, "Well, we come down every 2 weeks, so if you want to come back in a couple of weeks' time," and I was like, "Yeah, absolutely." So just about healed up from the first experience, and went back for another battering, and that's where it started. So yeah, started off on shooting some fairly straightforward targets at skeet, and then yeah, it was sporting for me. I got into sporting once I kind of understood the rough workings of it, and it was very, very rough, but yeah, great experience and some very fond memories.
I'd be curious because it seems like the sports have evolved and depending on the country differently, right? In the
Mhm.
UK, how was the sport back then? I mean, were there a lot of competitors? Has it always been? Because it's been part of Europe's DNA, right? So,
Yeah, I mean, as I'm sure you're aware, the sort of the difference between the setup in the States and the UK is probably less so now. You guys have done a much better job of making it what I would class a professional looking game. Um, there's still, I mean, in the UK, there's some incredible facilities which you'll be familiar with, and you said you're going to come over next year and have a look at some of them, which will be great. But when I started off, yeah, most of them were pretty rustic. There wasn't a clubhouse; it was kind of like a porter cabin kind of a thing. No proper toilets, anything like that. Which is, yeah, it's fine, but it's over the last, I think, 10 years in particular, it's really picked up in the UK, and everybody, generally speaking, is upping their game. And the guys that aren't either getting left behind or are no longer functioning. So in a way, obviously it sucks for the guys that it doesn't work for, but the competitive environment's meant everybody's pulled up and everyone's got better, which is
right.
fantastic. I still think we're commercially a long way behind you guys, but also we're a much smaller entity than you, as in geographically and also population wise. And we've got a different sort of structure with probably not so much different to California, I guess, but we've got a different structure with guns in the UK, so it's not something that you can just, everyone can turn up and have a go, although it's not that difficult in reality. One of the advantages we've got is being so small, everything's close. So what you might class as a close drive, it's only 3 hours down the road. Where I live, you can pretty much reach the East Coast, the West Coast, and the South Coast in 3 hours. So
Right.
unless I want to go to Scotland, I've got everything covered. Inside 2 hours drive, there's probably I wouldn't even like to say how many shooting grounds there are near me. Probably 50, something like
Wow.
that, ranging from very, very small scale local ones to the likes of the names that you'll be familiar with. So
Right.
EJ Churchill, Sporting Targets, West Midlands, Grimsthorpe, all of those are comfortably inside 2 hours for me,
Yeah.
which is great. But yeah, we're very lucky now that we've got a great number of grounds to choose from, and people are investing in the sport still, and I think it's getting better, which is good. It needs it. It needs to be more professional from my take as an outsider now, and I think
You
we're
think
gradually getting there.
Do you think it's evolved in the UK now in the last 10 years because of the way it's evolved in the US and the competition is now getting not stiffer, but just, in general, it's becoming a professional industry, if you will?
Yeah, I think traditionally we're 10 years behind what happened with you guys anyway, whether it's sort of politically or sport-wise. We've always been very amateurish with our approach to sport in general in the UK. The difference in outlook from an American perspective and a British perspective is night and day.
Yeah.
We do not have the sporting support that you guys have. Not just in shooting. This is just like a general thing. We're kind of like the keen amateurs all the time. And don't get me wrong, obviously we've had and we do have some incredible shooters, and we still do to this day. But I think if you came over and you saw sort of from an industry support perspective, what the guys and girls get, it would be pretty embarrassing as an American. But you've also got to look at it. It's a business, right? And
Right.
because the UK market is relatively speaking, I'm sure compared to the US market, tiny.
Hmm.
As a business, it doesn't necessarily make sense to dump millions of dollars into a market where you're not necessarily going to be able to grow it. So if it
Right.
was my business, I'd focus on what's happening in the US because you're going to get more return for your investment. So I completely get it. But having said that, there's people that are investing. There's a ground called, it was called Doveridge, now called Eaton Hall in the UK, which is under new ownership, and the guys there, Sid and Amy, are chucking some serious investment into it. And I think that's going to be a phenomenal place, even by US standards, and that's great to see because at the end of the day, that will pull the whole industry up.
Right.
So the more people that do better, the better it is for everybody else. A rising tide raises all ships. That's pretty deep, wasn't it?
No, it's true though. I mean, I totally agree with that too. I think I don't want to say Anthony only coined the phrase, but he did at one point in a podcast a while ago, and it's 100% truth, right? Just supporting your clubs locally, regionally, and nationally, I think is going to help the overall game and giving access to people who maybe didn't have access before. I mean, I like I said, I'm not the typical demographic in the U.S. to shoot sporting clays or clay targets in general. But I found the game much like you did, just by someone inviting me to come try it, and I got hooked immediately. And I think there's potential for more people to get into the sport, which will then help grow the industry, which will help grow the audience, which might help with sponsorships, etc. But it's still we're still at a nascent stage of this industry as a whole. I mean, if you're saying even in the UK where shooting has been part of the European DNA for such a long time. Only now it's starting to, become professionalized, if you will. That's pretty interesting to me. I thought it was a little bit more. I thought it was a little different because a lot of the manufacturers are from Europe, and they've been around forever. It seems like 60, 100 years, right? I mean, Beretta's been
Yeah,
around for 500 years, which blows my mind. Um, but it's interesting that the industry is still trying to catch up a little bit, and maybe it's just because they
yeah,
didn't see the potential in it before, and now folks are starting to see that
yeah.
potential.
I mean, I think the UK side, as I say, is relatively speaking is small.
Yeah,
So if you look at the numbers that we're dealing with, it's not the same numbers that you guys are dealing with.
that's
Having
right.
said that, the registered target stuff that's now shoots. So when I was back in the black and white days when I was shooting, you'd pretty much only be able to shoot registered targets on a Sunday or sometimes on a Saturday.
Hmm.
Now you can shoot any day of the week, probably except Monday, and most of the midweek registered shoots are hitting close to 200 entries at a minimum across the board. So the registered side of stuff is absolutely through the roof. Our major competitions, again, going back in the day, if you like, if you wanted to shoot the British Open, if you rang up and you had to do it on the phone, maybe the week before the shoot, as long as you weren't too fussed about which day you shot, you'd probably find a space most of the time. Now, the worlds, the British, the English, they get filled up in minutes.
Right.
So the demand for it is absolutely there. It's just I think in the UK where this is not a particularly popular view, but I think this is an opportunity to make the major competitions more expensive because supply and demand kind of shows that you can. But having said that, use the extra funding to make the events better.
Right, right.
So
That makes
there's
sense. That's just
still,
that's just logical business sense, right? That's not a, while it might be an unpopular idea, it just makes logical business sense for an
yeah,
industry.
and you know what, if you're, you know the deal, if you shoot in competitions, you're a competitor, you're going to do, let's say you're going to do six major championships in the UK. Okay. So six majors. You've got the worlds when it's in the UK, British, English, classic, maybe a couple of the side disciplines. So say you've got six. If you put £50 per entry extra, it's £300 extra spend for your year.
Hmm.
Well, it, again, it's not a particularly popular thing to say, but the £300 extra per year, if that's the difference between being able to do it and not, it's probably not the sport for you because you know what the running costs of just turning up to a shoot are. But if you can make that £50 extra per shoot, £25 of it going to a prize fund, and £25 of every entry going to improving the infrastructure of each shoot, so it's then more attractive for a ground to hold it. Because at the moment, there's actually not a great deal of encouragement, I think, for grounds to take the majors on because it's more
It's a lot
hassle
of
than it's
work.
worth for them.
Yeah, it's a lot of
So
work, a lot
let's
of
make
energy,
it,
effort. I'm actually always surprised by how shooters, I think I mentioned to you, I'm a banker by trade, so I work with companies and I lend money to companies, and I'm always looking at financial statements, and I'm always surprised by how a lot of shooters don't think or understand that a club needs to make a profit. They're like, oh, you know how
yeah,
much money they're making on this shoot? I'm like, yeah, they should. I mean, they should
yeah,
make money
good,
on the
yeah.
shoot.
If
That's
they
the whole point.
when that stops, you don't have a club. So
Right.
that's a problem.
Yeah.
And it does make me laugh because you'll get, insert product here. If you for a long time back before I did this job, I'd have a real job, and part of that was selling clothing. If you knew what a polo shirt that you pay $30-40 actually cost to make,
Yeah.
that
Four
guess
bucks
what? People make
maybe in today's age, but before that, even cheaper probably, right?
yeah, there's the whole thing is everyone makes money off everything. That's how the world works. And this attitude of people going, oh well, you can buy a clay for this much, it's this many pence or this many cents, so why am I paying this? If you need someone to explain you how that maths works, this is probably not for you. But
Right, right. You know,
that's universal.
I want to go back to you, just a little bit about, your background and your, situation. And I hope you don't mind me bringing up the health
Yeah, of
issue
course.
that kind of, but I
Yeah.
feel like maybe does your physical limitations shape your earlier approach to shooting because you decided instead of going into, let's say, rugby or whatever, what other sport would you have gotten into, you think?
I enjoyed rugby, but I would never have been. Sadly, I would never have been any good at it because I definitely wouldn't have had the. Don't think I'd have had the build for it. But I liked being competitive in stuff.
Yeah.
So it was great to find shooting or just fall into shooting because that kind of gave me a focus. I've got no doubt I would have found something else. It just happened that it was shooting. But yeah, it mentally, it absolutely gave me a like 100% focus because it was, yeah, without wanting to play the small violin thing, it was a pretty shitty time for me as a kid. So having something to look forward to and focus on was important. So when I was doing it, that for me was 110% of my focus every week was, when's the next time I'm going to be able to go shooting? So yeah, I never started it with a desire to be super, super competitive as such, but that's kind of where my personality took me with it, I suppose.
Mhm.
But you know what? It's for all the shit that happened at the time, I wouldn't want to change any of it now because feel very fortunate that I'm in a position that I can do a job that I love doing, earning a really good living, working with people I want to work with, at places I want to be. I wouldn't have had that if I hadn't had the other stuff. And I think it gives you, I wouldn't wish it on anyone, but I think, yeah, having something like that kind of gives you an interesting perspective on life. And it's certainly, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, it's certainly given me an interesting perspective on stuff. And yeah, it's kind of shaped a lot of what I've done
Do you
sort
mean
of
in terms of
personally, I
like
think.
what's important and what you should put
Yeah,
value into and things like that? Yeah.
yeah, 100%. Yeah, it gave me a focus for the shooting, but it certainly gives you a different perspective on life and, like you say, yeah, what your actual focus and your objectives are, what you should be looking at, and the stuff that in reality a lot of people worry about but probably isn't the most critical stuff to your end game. So yeah, no, it's been an interesting journey.
No, that's great. Do you think that if it wasn't for the health issue that you would have gotten into it? Like, would you have been introduced to it by your father at that point, or would he have had you go a different direction, you think?
Absolutely not. So there's no one in my family shoots at all.
Right, that's right. You mentioned that.
I'm completely from sort of outside of the circle. So if it wasn't for the health thing, I wouldn't have had the invite to come out. Or I would have been very unlikely to have had the invite to come out. And I can't imagine that it would have been something I would have fallen into because none of the kids that I hung around with were into shooting. Because I say it's not kind of a particularly normal thing in the UK. So yeah, I don't know
Oh,
what I
so
would have
it's
been doing.
it's not normal in the UK then.
No, no, it's certainly not. I mean, normal I would say is like playing football or soccer for you guys, or
Right.
rugby, or yeah, maybe you play tennis if you're that way inclined. But it's kind of they're the normal routes you go down if you like. There's not
Yeah.
many places where you go. I mean, it turned out that my secondary school did have a shooting team, but that's again not a regular
Not as
thing,
common.
and it's kind of again not having we've just been dealing with a gentleman in the States who's got something to do with a like a university shooting team, and just I mean listening to the numbers that you guys play with on that compared to like what we do is just night and
It's
day, man.
grown like crazy out here in not only just California, but in the United States on the junior level, and we're getting a lot
Yeah,
more
that's
folks
fantastic.
into it. And I think there's a bigger focus now, like high school teams as well as you mentioned. So, when I went to high school, we didn't have this. I actually played tennis in high school competitively.
Yeah.
That was my
Okay.
game. I grew up with tennis courts all around my house, and so that was the game that just my brother and I picked up. But I think it actually kind of probably helped with my hand-eye coordination for shooting, believe it or not.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I also, like you, got introduced to it much later in life, unlike you, though. But it wasn't something that my family knew anything about, or I even knew this world existed. So I'm just kind of grateful myself that I was introduced to it, albeit late.
Yeah.
You're the 2014 World FITASC champion, and World FITASC is an event, and that was around the time when I first got into shooting, 2013, that I learned about FITASC. And you topped the podium that year. I believe Zach was silver that year, and that's when I started taking notice of these world events. Can we go back to that time? And if you think back on that right now, what was the first thing that comes to mind when you think about that World FITASC win?
It's from a competitive standpoint, it's absolutely the highlight of my career. I mean, my objective when I was shooting was I wanted to win a world championship, and to be honest, my focus was more on the sporting. I've always been a like historically an English sporting shooter. That's where I wasn't a gun down shooter. I kind of forced myself to learn gun down shooting in a fairly short space of time, which I can touch on. So I think it was 2012, I decided to go full time into coaching. So I quit my job, went into full time coaching. 2012, I podiumed for the World Sporting when it was in England. I missed out by one, and that was kind of for me. I was like, right, that may have been your shot, if you like, because I felt I was right up there and just didn't quite do enough, but was within touching distance. Um, and then someone, when was it? I think it was 20, yeah, it was 2012. Someone made some bullshit comment that I overheard regarding coaching about because I shoot everything from a high gun position or almost everything from a high gun position. And someone said, oh, well, he won't be able to do any coaching at FITAS because he shoots everything gun up. So I thought, okay. Um, so I worked on shooting gun down, did the Great Britain selection shoots in 2013 and got into the team for GB for FITAS. Went over to Spain, started off pretty good and got food poisoning, and was just an absolute disaster. But I kind of like, what, I feel all right about this. I felt there was nothing. It wasn't sort of outside of my comfort zone as much as I thought it was going to be. And then yeah, 2014, everything felt right. I shot 50 targets the day before on the practice setup, shot 49 of them and felt like just at 200%. I was like, don't need to shoot anymore. Head's in a good place, game's in a good place. Didn't go into it necessarily saying to myself, right, you're going to win this, because I think that'd be a pretty stupid thing to do. But I certainly felt that I was going to be difficult to beat. I felt everything felt right, and you just know when everything feels good.
What did you
So
do differently to prepare, that year versus like 2012, for example? You mentioned, you overheard someone that motivated you to work on your mount, but what changed for you?
I don't think there was anything on an individual level that had changed. So cumulatively, I think it's experience through competing technically and mentally. I was still working in 2012 with Henry Hocking. In fact, I've been working with Henry for quite a few years on the mental side of stuff. I was still working with Henry through 2012, 13, 14. So it wasn't a case of anything had been done different. I think it's just you're looking for accumulation of small bits to fall into place. And
Hmm.
for me, technically, mentally, everything was just built up. It had kind of ramped up nicely. Training had gone well. I was very comfortable and relaxed with what I was doing. I didn't feel I had any weak points. I wasn't like, where previously you thought, kind of hope I don't see any of this stuff or this guy's there. Or I just felt very good and kind of shooting that first 50 targets of practice. Although practice doesn't have any bearing on the competition, the way the gun was moving, the way I felt was just like, yeah, this is good.
Yeah.
And I think from memory, I think I pretty much ran it from the front from day one. Yeah, I shot 49 on the first day. Think I was might have been possibly tied up on the second day with Will Fennell and a couple of other guys, and then just gradually started to slide away. But first 175 targets just felt like the easiest birds I'd ever shot. Everything was this big, balls of smoke, and then yeah, the last 25 started to feel a little bit harder and a little
The
bit
last
smaller. But
25.
fuck yeah, yeah,
So,
that was
so
where
just
I felt it.
just to clarify, it wasn't necessarily that the targets were easier saw or hard. It was just the fact that,
The targets were actually one of the easier layouts.
okay,
Um, so it was yeah, mentally it was just a case of I'd gone into the last day, I was way in front. So I think the last squad or one of the last squads out. So I had all of the morning just waiting and all of the night before thinking about it. And pretty much the thought that was going through my mind was don't be the guy that loses it because at the end of the day, I mean, it will go down as one of the biggest bottle jobs ever if you throw this away because you're that far in front going into the last 50. You're going to have to work hard to fuck this up.
yeah,
But I was always aware that I could do that. So
right,
um, yeah, and the first 25 of the day was one of the layouts that I was, if anything, a little bit cautious of because I know it'd taken a few people apart. And I shot a 25, shot 24 and missed my 25th bird out, which was a horrible target. And I was super happy to come off it with a 24. And yeah, went into the last 25 where everyone was saying, "Oh, this is easy. This will suit you. There's plenty of time." And yeah, the pressure kind of started ramping up a little bit on that one, and everything didn't quite feel so good. But thankfully, I managed to scrape past it. So
so do you mind touching on your experience? I've been asking shooters kind of like what their self-talk is when they're under pressure. What do they tell themselves? Sounds like you were aware of the pressure. You're
yeah.
telling yourself, don't F this up and don't do this. But is
Mhm.
that how do you talk to yourself or how do you manage that?
So that was completely the opposite of what I wanted to do. So the night before, I was lame with, stayed off the beer, had a same meal in the same restaurant that I'd been eating the night before. So I had my mum and dad with me and Ed Lyons, same place, same food, keep a routine, early-ish night, and was just laying in bed and I was thinking, right, I'd spoken to Henry, um, and mentally, so say the kind of the internal monologue was just going back to don't mess this up. And I was like, right, okay, that's the wrong way of looking at this. Rather than looking at a negative to avoid, let's look at the positive stuff. Let's start going through what you do want to do rather than what you want to not do.
Right.
Um, and yeah, it just kept circling back round to going in the wrong direction, like all night in my mind I was doing. So, right, put yourself out of this, change the scenario. Let's think about going fishing or something like this. And whichever way it came back round to shooting. And the bad thoughts were kind of just on the edge of it, but I managed to keep them away. And after the first 25 on the first day felt great, and yeah, the last 25 was a real grind. And I think the last 25 I shot a 23 or a 22, but it was a messy round. But it was just neat enough to get the job done. So yeah, I was very happy, and that's been a big learning experience for me, certainly from a mental perspective of just trying to manage your own brain, because sometimes it tends to go off in a direction that you know it's not meant to go off, but it still goes there. So you've just got to try and yeah,
It's
put it back
I
on
know this
track.
happens for everybody, but it's still refreshing for me at least because I'm such a negative self-talker and self-sabotager to hear that everyone kind of goes through this and has their own method and way of dealing with it. Do you find that because you've gone through that, because you've had that experience and you've been able to kind of manage it, that helps you with your coaching when you're helping other folks?
Certainly to an extent. So through having worked with Henry, I feel I've absorbed a lot of his knowledge. Probably 5% if I'm being optimistic, but it's a useful 5%. I certainly think there's certain things that I've experienced myself which can be useful that you can pass on to people. But having said that, everybody's an individual, and individuals have individual problems, and you can say how this is what I would do, or these are some self talk things you can do. Like you mentioned yourself, the self doubt. One of the worst things that you can do, in my mind, is focus on the negative stuff, because your mind tends to pick up on commands as opposed to negative. So if you say, right, don't think of an elephant, the first thing you do is you think of an elephant. So
Right.
rather than telling yourself, if someone who goes, I always miss rabbits in front, don't miss the rabbit in front, and then they go in and miss the rabbit in front, you're much better to reframe your internal monologue if you say, right, well, what do I want to do? Right, gonna come from the back of the target. I'm going to shoot a slow swing through, pull into the side of the bird, look at the back edge. Whatever you need to do to tell yourself to do something as opposed to not do something. And that's a super, super simple strategy. But from what we said earlier on before we were recording, that could possibly be something that you find useful. If
No,
you find
absolutely.
you've got the
Yeah, the
negative
story you
stuff
tell
coming in. So
yourself is
just
the story
reframe
that
it.
you'll experience, right?
100% right. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's good. If at all, what role did your support system, like coaches, family, friends, play in helping you achieve it? It sounds like Henry was instrumental in that. I'd be curious to know, like, what were your epiphanies with them, other than the reframing? Was there anything
Yeah,
else that
so
you?
I've worked with Henry on and off since I was in the juniors, because I
Okay,
felt certainly historically my mental game was possibly not great, and I thought that was coming from juniors to seniors. That was something that I felt was probably one of my weakest points. So I sort of doubled down on working on that with him. So the contact with Henry was always there. I had mum and dad who I just mum and dad. It's like having two of your best friends there, which was really nice. They keep you nice and relaxed. Generally speaking, stop me doing anything too stupid. Had Ed Lyons there, who, again, great guy. Not a great history of us not doing stupid stuff when I'm meant to, but he managed to get away from that, which was good. So it was a perfect storm for me. Everything was nice and relaxed. Everything was steady, and yeah, I think it was 100 small things came together at once rather than there being one sort of golden moment, if you like.
yeah, no, that makes sense. I think a couple of other competitors I've talked to about this, you know, it's not just in your shooting, but other things outside of your shooting have to kind of come to play, or just be settled or resolved or
It's
whatever it is.
it's
Right? You have to feel comfortable
small
about.
margins
Yeah,
for sure. Yeah, small margins, and when you're looking at any of the guys that are at the top end, the numbers you're working with, the margin for error are so small. You are starting to look at the very very small things you can do. So if you've got other work stuff going on in the back of your head, if you've got some arguments with your girlfriend or your wife going on in the background, you've had a shitty week at work, whatever, there's always going to be that can be the difference between being good and being great at the time, and the fact that there's probably 50 guys that are on there that can do, put the scores in that need to put the scores in. You don't have a great margin for error. You've got to try and make sure everything's 100%. Let me just plug my PC in, because I
please
think
do,
it's
please do.
don't want it to run out.
So, after you realized that you'd won, what was going through your head? Relief, pride, disbelief?
So I got to the last. Basically, in my mind, I'd worked it out, because I knew what the scores were because I was the last one out. So if I ran the last station, I knew no one could theory. Even if I think Zach even if Zach shot a 50 straight on the last day, if I ran the last station, he couldn't catch me. So I thought, well, it doesn't matter what's happened on the three stations previous. If you can run this last station, you're golden. And I did, which was good. But even though I kind of knew I statistically must have won it, I was like, I wasn't going to be fist pumping or anything. I was like, right, I need to go and see the scoreboard. I need to look that all of the scores are in and my name's at the top. And then I'm good. Then I can start enjoying myself. And all the guys behind me were sort of shouting and high fiving. I was like, I can't think of anything worse than having, you know, gone ape shit and gone, yeah, great, fantastic, gone absolutely nuts, and then go back and go, oh, actually, no, someone else has tied you, but you've got to have a shoot off now. I thought that would literally be mentally the most crippling thing that could ever have happened. So I thought, no,
Right.
I'm doing nothing until I go back and went back, saw the scoreboard, all the scores were in, done enough. And the first thing I did, I got a beer from the Krieghoff tent and had several of them, which was great. But just the most satisfying, um, pleasant memory of my competing career for sure. I've won various bits and pieces before and done some performances that, of course, I was super proud of. But yeah, that's yeah. If you had to wrap up one moment for me from sort of shooting clays over the years and being competitive, that for me was absolutely it.
I mean,
So
World
yeah,
FITASC is huge, right? I mean, we'll touch on this later, but because about desire, but if I were to ever be as competitive as some of the top competitors, I'd be the one I'd want to win. I mean,
yeah,
the most, that's the best shotgun game for me, aside from, Halise and a couple of other games. I really thoroughly enjoy FITASC, as a sport.
yeah.
How did that change? How did it change things for you, or did it? Did it open new doors? Did it change how
Um,
you saw yourself? Or
I think it changed the nature of my work to an extent. I think probably the split between UK based work and some of the overseas work increased because I'd done up until that point. I was very fortunate to be very busy coaching, but it was strongly based in the UK, so it was almost exclusively UK shooters in the UK with a few guys that travelled from overseas to see me. I think having done that and then that kind of puts your name out there a little bit more, that changed the demographic a bit. Look, it's a great thing to have on your CV, right? That's a fantastic thing. But I would say what's probably had more of an impact on my business, like the coaching side of things, is actually not my shooting, but the shooting of customers. If you go out and shoot fantastically, there will be a percentage of people that want to come to you for lessons. If you have guys and girls going out shooting fantastically that have been coached by you, you have a lot more people coming for lessons.
right,
And that's been something that I've certainly noticed. Which to begin with, when I was say 2012, when I went full time, I was still actively competing, and I wouldn't have necessarily had that down. I thought maybe I need to be competing to keep busy, but it absolutely did. It seemed to me actually it was the opposite. The less I competed and the more time and effort I put into my coaching, I suppose unsurprisingly, the more the coaching took off. And then as the coaching came up here, the competing side had to back down, and also the desire to do it was kind of been and gone really. I hit the target I wanted to hit, and then I was for 6 months or so. I was like super keen to go out and do it again, and then I had the like realization of you could potentially put the same amount of time and effort into this, and maybe it doesn't happen again
right,
because you know what the competitive environment's like. There's I think 50's legit. It could well be more, maybe 50 guys that could do win a world championship at any one time. All of those guys are super hungry for it, are training, are putting everything into it. Some of them are doing nothing but that.
right.
Am I going to be able to match that, or do I want to match that? And the reality is kind of no. I'd sooner focus on the business side of it, which for me is say primarily coaching, and I'm very happy with that. But
Well,
yeah,
you
I
bring up
mean,
a good
it's a
point, actually. I think a lot of people with the ability and the talent to compete at a world level like yourself come to that realization too. They go, look, is this going to be my life? And if it is, it's going to be, I got to make money doing it. And I mean, I think there's just a lot of, opportunity for people to kind of go in different directions with it. I mean, you didn't grow up around this, so
no,
You got into it, when you were 13. You didn't, grow up on a gun range, it sounds like it. But you competed at a young age and got to a high level at a young age because of your talent and ability, kept with it for a while because you had the desire to continue to improve and do better and win more. And then you reached kind of the pinnacle of our sport, right? World FITASC, won that, and then I could see what you mean. I see this happen on a much smaller scale with a lot of shooters that come in and out of our sport here in the U.S. Folks meet masterclass. I'm not trying to compare masterclass to World FITASC, but
Yeah, of course.
they hit a certain level of achievement and then they lose desire and interest at that point.
Yeah.
How do you combat that, you think, for other people, and for if you're looking at it from an industry person standpoint, how do you think we can combat that?
I think one of the things that personally would do, and again, this is a personal thing, so it's not saying it's right or wrong, is there's you I think you guys have got it better in the US, but I still don't think, for example, the prize money that you guys get when you bear in mind how much you've got to travel, spend, train and stuff, you're only optimistically, if you do well, going to break even for a year.
Right.
Well,
Makes sense. Yeah.
why do you want to break even doing anything?
Right. Right. Right.
That's crazy. I don't think it's realistic in the UK to make it professional because I don't think that the numbers stack up. It's a business. I did toy with the idea. I actually discussed it with Johnny on TGS, doing like a invitation 20-man shoot, but you all back yourself with 5 grand, 10 grand, whatever it is, and you say we're gonna go in, we're gonna do this, back yourself. This is how we're gonna get some serious prize money. You could then get some proper high quality videography. You could then pitch it as a legit event for sponsors to try and take on. That could work, but
Yeah,
yeah,
money's the
that's
motivator. You're 100% right. That's the way to get people to continue with the desire and to continue the focus on it. Because if you're a reasonable, logical, rational person, which I think you are, you start to realize that where am I going to benefit the most out of my shooting journey or career, right?
yeah.
And I think you've been able to figure that out. Just to touch on this real quick, if you don't mind. I know it's very different in the UK versus the US with master versus what's considered is it AAA or double A?
So we've got AAA. So AAA is only used in the majors. So AAA class is the top 5% of the averages every 6 months. So we get a recalculation every 6 months, so it's refreshed. So you can go up an unlimited number of classes in one go. You can only drop down one at a time. So you can't go from AAA to B, which for obvious reasons that'd be no good. But the major championships has a AAA class, which says that the top 5%. So that would be, I guess, that's the equivalent of master, but from a UK perspective, the way you guys do the classing system makes absolutely zero sense to me, and
Yeah.
that's something that I know is probably a pretty controversial view on stuff. But I know masterclass is the biggest class, and that in itself to me makes no sense because you're like, well, how come more people are at the you know masterclass in my mind should be elite,
Right.
and
Right.
I think that the fact is, again, don't get me, I may have this around my neck, but essentially if you shoot enough targets, including little small bore side events and stuff, you get to masterclass, and then you can choose to stay there for the rest of your life.
Right. Right.
That
Yeah, I think they're
strikes me as absolutely ridiculous.
I'm in 100% agreement with you on that. Gary and I touched on that too during our podcast, Gary Fitzgerald, and we both
I
agreed
love
that
Gary.
yeah, he's a good dude. But we agree. I think we're all in the same boat on that front. I think it's interesting. We were talking about the difference between a competitor class and an achievement class, right? And some
Mhm.
people want to retain that moniker of having it's like when you're in martial arts. I used this analogy before, but when you're in martial arts, you earn your way up to a black belt, and once you get your black belt, you never lose your black belt. It doesn't mean that you're a good fighter. It doesn't mean that you can
Yeah,
fight.
it means you've ticked the boxes at some point in the past to get this, and yeah, absolutely. So you could have you can have your black belt master badge if you want, but
Yeah,
then when it comes to competitions, you go, well, in the real world, you're shooting a 60% average, so you need to be in B or
right.
C or
And I
whatever.
think if I don't know what the answer is to this, but one of the thoughts was if there could be an achievement title that says that you've put in the work to get to a certain point, great. But in the competitive world, you need to be competitive, and you know your competition varies depending on how often you're shooting, when you're shooting, and all that. And to your point, I do believe masterclass needs to be the elite. I love the fact that it's the top 5%. Man, that's in England. That's gonna be that's gonna be a really competitive class then.
Yeah, I mean, it's brutal. You're not gonna, even if you try and manage the shoots and stuff you go to. Good luck getting into AAA class by accident.
Right.
It won't happen.
Yeah.
It's like winning a 3 day, 4 day shoot by accident. It doesn't happen. You know,
Right.
you can't do that. And yeah, double A class. So the way it works, and again, the numbers for me may be slightly off here. Triple A class is for sure is the top 5%. I then think double A class is maybe the next 15% down,
Okay.
15 or 20. Then the next 20% down goes into A class, the next 20% B, and then everything else goes into C. And we only go down to C in the UK. And that's done off your what we call an adjusted average, so off your registered targets. And it works pretty well. You know, there's some shoots that shoot a little softer, there's some shoots a little harder. That's why it's an average.
So is it
Yeah,
your
it's
average or is it the average of the shoot that you competed
your
in?
it's your, so it's your average, which obviously is a function of the shoot. You have to shoot a certain number of rounds, certain minimum amount of targets, and then you get an adjusted average. So they'll take away any outlying scores will be removed, gets readjusted, and then you get your average, which puts you in whichever class. And then that's done by the CPSA, so same version of the NSCA for us. And that gets recalculated every 6 months. And you know what? It's a pretty solid way of doing it.
No, I think it's great. I wasn't aware of this. So this is interesting to hear, and it seems like it makes a lot of sense. I'm curious why the US chose a different method, classification method, when it sounds like there's a method that already works. I mean, it could be, well, I could think of it from a business model standpoint, why it would be that way to encourage more people to shoot. Because, you know, we
And
started at
that's
E.
yeah, that's a legit thing. You know, if it's an encouragement to get people to shoot more targets, great. Again, great for the sport. Um, but I think there also needs to be a little bit of a handle on it from a reality check from a competition standpoint. But I think
Right.
that's like we said before. I think with all of this stuff, if you poll 100 people, you're not going to get 100 people on the same thing. You've just got to try and look at something that works for the industry as a whole. And
Right.
you're going to lose a few people, you're going to gain a few people. I think as long as you're trying to make the sport better,
Yeah.
do what you got to do.
Do you know just off the top of your head, just a guesstimate? I'm not going to hold you to it, but do you know how many shooters there are in the UK competitively?
No is the
Okay.
the honest answer. I'm trying to remember. I think there might be, and again, you'll have to. I'll apologize if these numbers are wrong. I want to say maybe 25,000 members of the CPSA,
Okay.
but I think a relatively small percentage of those are regular competition, like registered target shooters. Um, I'm not going to guess what the numbers are because it would just be a guess. But
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Fair. No, I feel like it's comparable but changing in the US though. So I just don't know the makeup either. I've heard it before at some shoot, but I can't recall it as well. But I'll maybe look into that and post about it.
what's noticeable from the industry in the UK last few years, probably since COVID, is that the split between what I say, I'm on a shooting ground 6 days most weeks. The split between guys shooting practice and shooting registered has definitely swung. There's lots more registered targets being shot in the UK now, and the practice numbers have gone down. I think part of that's down to ammo costs. And people are thinking, well, if I'm going to shoot the registered stuff, and they almost use that as their practice because the ability to shoot registered targets in the UK is second to none. I mean, you've got within 2 hour radius, you could be shooting all week. You could take a day off on Monday, and you could be shooting registered, well set, professionally refed, registered targets every day. I mean, we
Oh
again the
wow.
thing that one of the things that I find very hard, and it's same in Australia, incidentally. I find very hard to get my head around is this idea of going to a registered shoot or going to any shoot that's competition and being able to basically score it amongst yourselves. That blows my mind purely because we've had some issues in the past in the UK with people who are a bit flexible with that kind of stuff, and unfortunately, people being people, that will happen as long as there's an opportunity for it. So
Right.
if you go and shoot a registered shoot in the UK on any day of the week, part of that is you have a accredited referee. It's not a 14-year-old kid or a girl that you can kind of bully into doing stuff. You've got a qualified ref taking your squad round or on each individual stand. And for me, that kind of is that has to be a gold standard for
That's
certainly any major
amazing. I
competition.
didn't realize that. So on a Tuesday, there's a
Hmm.
competition and there's an accredited ref with you.
Yep.
Wow. That's amazing. I don't know why we haven't been able to figure that out then. How did how did you guys figure that part out?
Yeah,
Is
I
that an
think
employee of the range or
so. Not I don't run a shooting range myself, but there's like a pool of refs, like regular refs, and they travel around. They'll travel around the UK. Obviously, the distances we're covering are different, right?
right,
The
right, right.
UK comfortably fits inside Texas. So to say that that's a workable thing for the US, maybe not, but there's got to be some middle ground. I would have thought, certainly for the majors. I mean, I know again when you guys have a major, you've got all of the side events, you've got the FITAS, the sub gauge, the prelims, the doubles, all this kind of stuff. That takes an enormous number of refs. But I would have thought part of that needs to be if it's a major, if you've got to fly them in, you fly them in.
Right, right.
Because just yeah, it's people being people. It's the 1% unfortunately ruin it for the 99%, and some people will take advantage where they can by fair means or foul. And if you know it's a problem, it kind of needs to be dealt with in my mind.
Addressed. Yeah, no, totally
Yeah.
makes sense. And you bring up a really good point about the geographic kind of coverage. I'm sure certain states can probably figure that out, and their local
Hmm.
state associations could probably create like a ref pool and maybe even pay. These are paid refs as well, right? The accredited
Yes.
refs.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So maybe that could be incorporated, not to add to additional costs, but just thinking out loud. But no, that's interesting. Interesting. Tuesday through
Yeah. Or
Sunday, being able to
get
shoot
one of
would
the
be amazing.
sponsors. Get one of the sponsors. You say, okay, that sponsor X is going to be responsible for your supplying your scorers for this shoot. Thank you very
Yeah.
much, XYZ. Thank you.
Right, right, right. No, that makes a lot of sense. Interesting. So, going back to kind of your style of shooting and what you've done, I've watched a lot of the UK shooters on video, obviously, because I'm not out there, but definitely planning on coming next year. You mentioned that when you first started, you had a style that was heavily timing based in your early years. What
Yeah.
were the specific limitations of that approach, and what did you do to change that, if at
So the
all?
specific, yeah, sure. So the specific limitations seem to be very much which side of the bed I got out of. If I would spot shoot everything as soon as it came off the arm.
Okay.
So if it was an incomer that came from 100 yards away and landed at 10, I'd probably shoot it at 95. And when it worked, it looked great. It was fantastic. When it didn't work, it really didn't work. There's certain target styles and presentations which it just does not lend itself to. And then I kind of would say I got away with it when I was in the juniors because you're not under the level of scrutiny and competition that you're in the seniors. But I realized coming outside of the juniors, if I wanted to start being more competitive in the seniors, I'd have to work a little bit harder on some of the stuff. So yeah,
And that was a
picked up.
conscious decision you made. That wasn't through any coaching you were getting. It was just more
Yeah, no,
analyzing your game.
that was just me sort of adding two and two together and getting four. I was like, yeah, I can see this is a problem. I can understand, or I think I understand why it's a problem and where it's a problem. Sometimes it's a great skill to have, and so there's instances where it's dug me out of a hole, and it's certainly as a tool in the box if you are comfortable shooting, spot shooting and shooting stuff with diminishing lead and collapsing lead real quick. There's instances where it is absolutely a lifesaver in individual circumstances. But for me, using it as a base method for everything was too hit and miss. So that's where I started to get comfortable. Some stuff coming from the back of the target. Um, don't shoot a great deal of pull away. More sort of smaller lead targets now. Swing through is probably more normal for me. But if you were to say just pick up a gun and shoot a target naturally, 9 times out of 10, I'd hold into a space and watch it come into the gun.
Hmm.
Um, and probably rather quicker than I should, but that's uh, that's what it is. But yeah,
So was
I
that
sort
like
of
a, would you
consciously,
consider that a bad habit that you had to break?
yeah, for sure. So again, it was there's instances. There's no, I don't think there's a bad method. There's methods which are better and worse under certain circumstances. Um, Probably when I started out, as a rule, the targets we shot in the UK, we had a lot of big space, fast, good distance birds. Over the years, that's changed. So we've started to get targets have come in a little bit, starting to get much more sort of technical birds, rolling targets, things that, probably 15 years ago we couldn't do with clay machines.
Mhm.
We just had, generally speaking, stuff further out and bigger gaps, and it's developed. The shooting, sport has developed, and as such, I think shooters themselves need to develop. And if you just stick doing the same thing, I think everyone's gonna pass you by. So gradually, I kind of worked on, say, purely from a personal perspective, what worked for me as a shot selection. Not to say that, pull away is bad, swing through is wrong, maintain lead's great. They're all completely legit. It's understanding where you as a shooter can get the most out of each method on each target, and it's not always going to be the same. I
Right.
don't believe that, if you look at, say, George is a great example. There's no one in my mind ever going to have won nearly as much as George.
Right.
You watch George shoot, and then you watch Richard Folds shoot with the same targets, and you're going to see two completely opposing styles and methodologies, and they're both fantastic.
Right.
So, your job is, don't say George does this, so I've got to do what George does, or Richard does this, so I've got to do what Richard does. You've got to find which of those shots suit you as a person, under which circumstances, and learn, how to use your toolbox. So, right, okay,
100%.
I'm gonna choose to
Yeah.
shoot swing through on this. I'm going to choose to shoot maintain on this. I'm going to pull away from this target. I'm going to collapse this bird in for the following reasons. And then as you train that over time, it becomes less of a conscious choice and more of a subconscious thing. But you don't get to subconscious competency without going through conscious incompetency, and that's where you learn.
Oh, very well
And
said.
that's
Very well said. Do you feel like you're still learning, or do you feel like your style is locked in because you've gone through all that conscious, training?
I think you're absolutely still learning. So I will go, and I know people find this very hard to believe. I will go 4 or 5 months at a time, sometimes without shooting a clay. So my shooting is kind of irrelevant now as far as I'm concerned. But you just it's such a difficult thing to quantify, I suppose. Trying to think how to, yeah, go. We'll go start that one again. So hit me with
Yeah,
that question
I
again
feel
because I
like
can't.
once you've learned everything, right? And I think
Mm,
people go through different phases in their training where, you go from like when I first started shooting, I'm just going to use me as an example. I didn't think
yep,
about any technique whatsoever. I just looked at the target, made a move, and would kill the bird. And then
yep.
as I started learning more about techniques and different approaches and different ways, I started overthinking every time I started shooting. And it took me a while to learn those and not be so conscious about it, but go subconscious about it. And you mentioned that through the repetition you end up becoming subconscious with it. But now that you've been doing this for so long, do you find yourself still learning to tweak things and being conscious about your training, or is it all
So
natural now?
yeah, I mean, I think yes, I think you're always learning, and I think the day that you stop learning from anything is a bad day. I rarely shoot now, so my shooting's kind of all over the place. It's very much, it is what it is. But I think from a coaching perspective, you will see stuff that you can go, there's going to be relevance to what this guy or this girl's going through, that I'm going to be able to use and help somebody else. It might not be your own shooting, but I think if you are shooting regularly, you will also see that there's stuff that you can see, whether it's by watching somebody else make a mistake that you're aware of. Go, that's interesting. I'd never actually seen that from this perspective. It's sometimes easier to see stuff from a third person perspective as opposed to just doing the shooting yourself. And I think you have to be open minded, because with sporting there's an infinite number of variables. So it's not like skeet where, just picking skeet as an example, and this is no disrespect to skeet, because shooting 100 straight or 400 straight to skeet still is phenomenal. But
Right.
you've got two targets shot in a known sequence from a known set of positions, 7 or 8 positions. once you've kind of got the gist of that, you can just grind through that and you will get better by pulling the trigger more. For me, with sporting, it's much more about understanding the process and saying, right, the finer intricacies of it. I need to do this under this circumstance and this under this circumstance. You drill those moves in through training. So once you've done good quality training, the end game of when you compete is you don't have to consciously think of, right, I need to shoot, swing through on this driven bird, and I'm going to collapse this big battue into the gun because it happens. But you don't get to the point where it happens with the right move without having gone through that sort of learning process and being, quite wooden, if you like, going through, right, I'm going to have to do this, this, this.
Right.
And that's where I think training is quite important for people to understand. Training's not a scored event. You're there to learn new moves, and learning new moves is probably going to involve missing. And sometimes people don't like that.
Right.
Building big scores is a separate thing, and that's a thing that you can do for sure. And that's a legit part of your training is getting people to get comfortable building a big score. That's further down the line for me. Learning the mechanics and the different shot selections is much more important.
Well, it's interesting you say that. I was just talking to a friend who always like jokes that I'm a snob about trap shooting because I don't shoot trap at my home club. And
You're not fat enough.
yeah, well, I don't know about that, but I told him I was like, trap and skeet to me, which are great games, and don't get me wrong, I enjoy those disciplines. To me, they feel like games, where you learn how to shoot a target. And sporting and FITASC, you end up learning how to shoot a shotgun. And just a different approach to it, right? It's like shooting a target versus actually using your shotgun to its full potential.
Yeah, it's more
That's the difference
fluid.
in those games. Yeah, yeah,
And I mean, I've got absolutely nothing but respect for the guys that can shoot trap and skeet to a high level because I think doing when you've done anything reasonably competitive, you realize to get super good at anything, you have to put a hell of a lot of work in. And for anyone to think that it's skeet, so it's easy, or it's trap, so it's easy, or stuff happens by accident. None of that shit happens by accident. Those
right,
guys
right.
get very good by being incredibly talented, incredibly hardworking, and incredibly dedicated. And I'm sure a lot of the guys that are super, super high performers in trap and skeet, if for whatever reason they decided to get into sporting and had the same focus and determination in that, they would have got incredibly good at sporting.
Totally
It's
agree.
just
Their
where
mental
you,
game is usually much more solid than I think, the guy that started or the gal that started in sporting to start off with, because between their shoot
for
offs
sure,
and need for perfection and everything, managing their technique and their mechanics, I think they've got that pretty down pat.
absolutely, and that's where using trap and skeet as a tool to aid your sporting can be completely legit because it teaches you to just keep breaking targets, and that's where running a really really good pre-shot routine you can do that on trap. I did with Henry. A big part of my pre-shot routine was running it on what we call DTL, which is like singles trap, where the targets are certainly not difficult, but you've got to hit every single one. And every time you call pull, you need to be 100% happy with your mental setup and your physical setup. Otherwise, you've got a potential problem. And if you can then bring that across into your approach into sporting, that's an advantage.
That's actually
So
huge. That's a great
does trap
idea.
shooting does trap shooting make you a better sporting shooter? No, absolutely not. But you can use it as part of your tool selection to hone one of the elements of your game. So if you feel that your score building or your mental game's weak, shooting singles at trap, as long as you've got a structure to run and a process to work with, just going out and shooting trap isn't going to make you better at sporting. But if you use it as a tool to get better at sporting, you can for sure.
Right. No, I totally see that. Yeah, that's where I think you can develop that mental toughness and fortitude, your pre-shot routine, your ability to recover from a miss. Um, those are all important, skills to have as you're shooting any of the shotgun sports or any, sport for that matter. So, no, that's
Absolutely.
interesting. How, speaking of mindset though, what role does your mindset play when you're in a world championship versus a local competition? Don't get me wrong. I get they're totally different. The pressure is different. But when you were competing, do you feel like you kept the same mindset for even local competitions and less relevant ones?
I think the ideal situation is yes, they're all the same because I think if you build a shoot up to be something, you know, special or different, generally speaking, you're going to underperform. And the only way you can get to the stage where your major championships have the same feel as your local registered is by doing a lot more major championships. So, and that's experience. And one of the things I say to my guys and girls a lot is you cannot coach experience into people. You can give them as much of a head start technically, and you can say, look, if you're on your last station for a major championship, you're probably going to feel like this, and this is some of the stuff that you might want to look at doing. You can give them as much information that you've learnt yourself over the years. The fact is, until they're in that position and they understand how they operate as a human, you can't tell them that. Part of it is you have to go out and experience that. So I think the ultimate is when you can turn up to the world championship and you can have the exact same mental attitude and feeling as if you're turning up to your local 100 bird sporting.
Right.
So
That makes a
that
lot of
would be
sense.
that would be the end goal, and that would be the best thing. Easier said than done.
Right.
And
Right.
to say that I got to the stage where I could do that every time, I'll be lying.
Right.
I had times where I would turn up to big shoots and I felt, everything, like I said, the World FITAS in 14 was obviously one of them, but there've been numerous times before where I was like, yeah, I'm feeling pretty good. I'm going to be a tough guy to beat today. I'd have had a lot more where I turned up and I felt on the back foot and I felt like shit. Um, so for anyone to say that you got to the stage where you could control that perfectly, I know I didn't. I knew I could do stuff better, and when I got stuff wrong, I looked at making it as good as I could do. And you sometimes have to do a bit of damage limitation, but yeah, it's easier said than done. If you could give an answer to that in a wanna and get people to understand it, you'd be able to earn a lot of money.
No, it's true. I totally agree. Experience, you just can't trump experience when it comes to these things. And coaching and training at the end of the day is just to build your foundation that you need to build off of as well, right? It's
Yeah,
a practice, right? Like any other practice, martial arts, even yoga or whatever you're doing. You start with the base and the knowledge and all the tools, and then you have to use those tools once and apply it to your approach. But
yeah.
now, speaking of coaching, you've coached champions at every level, it sounds like it, from club shooters to world title holders. What's been the common mistake you've seen that even experienced shooters make?
I think for me, one of the things that I look at from my coaching perspective is that very much everybody is an individual, and it's difficult to give like a cut and paste answer to stuff. I think just getting people to have an open mind, and if something's not working, change it.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that. You can be a super 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 comfortable maintain lead shooter, but if you're consistently struggling with a certain presentation, and for whatever reason it's not going to crucify you, but it's dropping you consistently more targets than it needs to, that's when I say, well, why do you want to carry on doing this? Let's look at playing with some of the other options for the following reasons. And as long as people have got an open mind, um, more often than not, at the end of the day, if they're there with you for coaching, they should have a pretty open mind. It's just the ability to change. If something's not working, go, okay, let's look at changing it. I'm also super happy if someone's going to take on a shot selection that I wouldn't personally look at, but they're doing it really well and it's consistently working for them. Hey, carry on.
No,
No problem. Is it
that's awesome. So you're really, as a coach, instead of like giving them, I mean, you'll give them the set tools, but it sounds like what you're also helping them do is find their own rhythm or style to what works for them.
you've got to work with the person that's in front of you.
Right.
There's certain shots that I might personally feel really comfortable taking on. I could spend months trying to get somebody else to get comfortable with, and it just doesn't work for them. And you've got to recognize that. Is that use George as an example. George shoots primarily swing through on a lot of stuff, and he shoots it incredibly well. Um, is that going to work brilliantly for everybody? No. Is it a great, solid method? Yes. Are you going to be able to get it to, I shoot this target this way for everybody? Some people that will really click with, of course, and they'll do really, really well. But you'll find also some people it just either leaves them cold or takes them backwards. Well, we then need to be able to go, okay, if you're not, I mean, a great example is in the UK, if people have got a history of game shooting, so shooting driven game, generally speaking, they tend to rely more on swing through as a shot, so they're naturally more swing through shooters. If they've built that muscle memory up over 25, 30 years, and I suddenly say, I shoot a lot of maintain lead, I think you should do that, you're going to absolutely crush them. So you've got to look at what that shooter's objectives are and say, okay, if shooting swing through on these particular targets is causing you an enormous problem, right, let's look at learning a new method. Or you say, okay, you're shooting a very aggressive version of swing through at the moment. Let's still use swing through, but let's learn how to tone it down a little bit. And we're going to start making it play to your strengths a bit more. You still might need to get them to come away from swing through in individual instances, but you can work with what they've got rather than trying to rip them down to the floor. Obviously, it depends on someone's objective. If someone says, I would like to get to a world class level, part of that is, okay, if you're in this for the long game, let's look at ripping you down where you need to get ripped down. If some guy's shooting 75 and his objective he wants to get to 80, beating him into the ground is absolutely useless. You could just say, yeah, we can find 5 extra targets by tidying up what you're going to do. Because if you're honest with the vast majority of people, and this is where we haven't talked about, we very briefly touched on the eye dominance thing, where people go, oh, you can't have someone closing an eye, you can't have someone having a patch. You go, well, you absolutely can, number one. And I mean, so I've got, if you don't need to, of course, I wouldn't get you doing it, but I've got guys shooting to like a national level who have got some form of occlusion or squint an eye down on certain shots because they need to.
Hmm.
Um, so is it perfect? No. But is it less perfect than them not doing it?
Right.
That's the answer. So if
Right.
someone,
Right.
most of the guys, and it makes me laugh, on a lot of the Facebook shooting groups and stuff, you'll get these people, bless them, coming on and chirping up, ah, you want to do this, you want to do that. Ah, you can't ever close an eye because what do you think this guy's objectives are? If he's at the moment shooting 40, 50, 60%, and he'd be stoked to get to 75, 75 is not a barrier for someone squinting an eye down. What's more of a barrier is someone shooting with cross dominance problems that they aren't addressing.
Right.
Um, and I kind of liken that to someone saying, "Oh well, this guy's a really really good shot. He doesn't close an eye." Yeah, I'm not diabetic and I don't inject insulin. But if you're a diabetic, you might need to do it. Just because it's works for one guy doesn't mean it works for someone else. And we're not working always with perfect scenarios. You're looking at what can we do to make somebody the best version of what they can do. And if their end goal is shooting 80%, I think you could get people shooting 80% on sporting with half an eye.
Right.
It's not the biggest fundamental flaws most people have is technical inadequacies that they don't want to accept that they've got. Um, the eye thing is almost secondary. I would always sooner, like if someone said to me, I want to get to a super competitive level, they're strong left eye dominant. First thing I'd say, let's swap your shoulders.
Hmm.
Okay, you might have to go back a little bit for a year, but end goal, you're going to be far better. But if you've got someone who's been shooting for 25 years off the right shoulder, it's much, they're not going to want to relearn. And it's not realistic. You say, okay, are you willing to put, I don't know, 25, 30,000 rounds a year down the gun, swapping shoulders, buy a new gun, learn the new stance, all that kind of stuff? No, they're not. So, okay, well, let's work with what you've got.
Well, speaking of the vision side of things, I'd be remiss if we didn't bring up Edwards Eyewear. You partnered with your friend Ed Lyons, and it sounds like you guys have
Yes.
known each other for a long time, maybe even before. Were you working with Ed on vision training as well before you
Yep.
got into business with him? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So I met Ed as a customer of Ed's. So I think it would have been probably about 2010. So I still I had a proper job, if you like, and I was doing coaching at weekends. And one of my customers went and saw Ed and had a really really impressive experience with him.
And did Ed
At the
shoot
time,
before this too? Was he like a shooter's vision
yeah,
guy, or did he get into it?
Ed, Ed did a bit of shooting at the time, but not a great deal. Customer of mine been to see him and said this guy's fantastic. So I said, okay, well, I wore glasses at the time. I still do, obviously. And I was like, right, well, I'm going to go and see this guy. A, because it sounds like he's doing a great job. And if he can help me be 1% better, I'll take it. But also, I thought from a coaching perspective, this will be interesting for me to see. There might be some carryover into my business. Um, Did that within 5 minutes of meeting him. We got on like a absolute house on fire. Had a 2.5 hour sports vision assessment with him, which was fantastic. He tidied up my prescription and made me see better than I've ever seen before by a country mile. I was his last customer of the day, and he was like, "Right, do you want to go out and have a steak?" I was like, "Yep, let's go." Ended up having dinner, had a good chat. It was my birthday, I think, a week or so later, when I said, "Look, if you want to meet some more shooters, come out with me. We'll come and have a few beers. You'll meet some of the guys." And it just started from there. And yeah, we started the eyewear company up in 2019, just in time for COVID, which was great.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, it's been a really really interesting journey. We've got some stuff really really right. We've got some stuff really really wrong, which I think is anytime you set up a new business, that's kind of part of the course.
It is. It
I know
is. Yeah.
you've got some of our prescription glasses, which
I
is
do,
great to
and I
see,
like
and
them, and I
obviously
wear them.
looking looking very sexy with them all the time. I see, which is good.
I think it's
Um,
the Heroku. I think the Heroku is
Yeah,
what I ended
Hiroki.
up
You've got
getting.
the Hiroki 2 in Amethyst, I seem to
Yes,
remember.
I did. That's exactly right. And I
Yeah.
do wear it. I enjoy it. I do also have a pair of Rangers and Pilas. I lean more towards yours and the Rangers a little bit, depending on what it is, because depending on the lens I need. I
Yep.
didn't get multiple of the Edwards eyewear lenses, unfortunately, I should. I'm
And
curious, are
that's
you
that'll
guys
be
going to be
that
making one that wraps a little bit? I know wrapping is harder with prescription, but do you have an idea to make one that wraps a little bit?
we we 100% do, yeah. We want to our long-term goal, the Hirokis, which is what you see Johnny wearing. You've got to pay yourself. I shooting them.
Yep.
That's our sort of like 95% of our sales is that. So for shooting, but also for like casual wear because they look pretty cool. Um, our end game is going to be probably some version of a wraparound interchangeable lens product. But at the minute, because me and Ed run this as a business with just me and Ed, and we've got Morgan, who's fantastic, who helps us with the social media and our website because we're both useless. Um, that's it. So like we send out, I package up and send out the ready to wear glasses, the stocks at my house. Ed deals with all the prescription stuff. The problem is we've both got full-time jobs. We do it at night. At the moment, having another line of products at the minute, we haven't got the time or the space. So we're waiting for a big. We've almost sold out of all our Hirokis at the minute, which is great. We're waiting for a big delivery, and once they come through, that's going to be like a 2 day job of just stock checking, packing, all that kind of stuff. If we go to the stage of getting another product, we're going to have to start warehousing, taking on full-time members of staff. And I think just for us at the moment, with the time constraints, that's it's in the pipeline for sure. It's in the pipeline. It's on the time scale,
Yeah.
but I think we've got to think about how we're going to grow the business because the last thing we want to do is grow the business too fast and then start basically letting people down on the service side of things, which is will be a big disappointment for us because obviously putting your name to something, you don't want anyone to have a sub
Yeah.
subpar experience.
Well, it's a quality product, and I'm not just saying that because you're on here with me. I'm just being genuine. I like it. It holds up really well. It takes a beating pretty well too because I'm not really easy on my stuff at all. The reason why I was bringing up the wraparound is so I think, and I'm just guessing here in the UK, you don't use a lot of golf carts, right? It's mostly walking the courses, or is it just all walking the courses?
Largely speaking, so thankfully, I don't know whether it's a coincidence or not. The two ranges that I work at full time, which is Sporting Targets and Grimsthorpe, both have golf carts, which is great because I hate walking. So that's
Yeah.
that's good. But as a rule, at the competitions, everybody walks. No
Okay.
one, unless you've got a mobility issue, no one turns up with a golf cart or a 4-wheel drive. And also, to be fair, a lot of our courses aren't built for it. Um, but yeah, almost all of the stuff in the UK is walking.
Yeah, we take a lot of carts everywhere, typical American approach to everything, right? So
Yeah,
usually when I'm on the cart, wind's getting in there and blowing into my eyes. These honkers are huge, and they collect every pollen, dust, particle that you
yeah.
can imagine, despite how big they are. But no, it'd be good to see a wraparound version of it as well because I actually really enjoy the product, and I use it
Yeah,
regularly, especially when I have a green background. That's when I'm using your guys' product.
Yeah, the amethyst lens, which is what you've got, is obviously I'm biased, but I think Ed's knocked that one out of the park with the filtration, the fact that
Yes.
how it kills green and pops orange is
Yep.
I don't think there's anything better. And we've sort of got 8 lens colors now, and we don't really think we need any more than that. I think there's a lot of bullshit in trying to just make colors up for the sake of making colors up, and
Right.
we're pretty happy that the 8 options we've got now cover off 99% of the light conditions, and yeah, it doesn't need to be any more complex than that.
Can you
Further
touch on that?
down,
Because I think you're 100% right on that.
mm,
I think most shooters, they get crazy with the different colors and lenses, end up using 2 to 3 lenses at the end of the day anyways, right? It's just you're letting the light in or you're not letting the light in depending on how bright it is. So, for
and
me,
there's yeah,
go
sorry,
ahead.
Karen.
Go, no, no, go ahead. Go ahead.
I think, I mean, obviously, I've got access to a limitless supply of sunglasses for obvious reasons. I pretty much live in two. Um, and I'm personally quite sensitive to light, so I tend to go darker lenses than most people. Um, I live in like a polarized bronze or the amethyst that you were talking about. It's like a purple.
Hmm.
And then for really, really, really low light levels, I have it's actually one of our sort of like prototype colors, if you like, um, sort of like a low orange between what we call a saffron and a fuchsia, and I pretty much live in that. But that for me is it. I can't stand yellow lenses personally. We do
Same.
we do 2 versions because there's plenty of guys that do. One's a super super low light lens called a Laguna, which is good for night shooting and people who are not light sensitive at all. And then a cadmium, which is kind of like more of a high contrast. But both of those for me are just too bright under any circumstances, so I can't deal with them. But most people, I think, could comfortably get away with 2 lenses. And when you start getting to the stage that you've got, 6, 7, 8, 9 lenses, how much mental space are you
Right.
giving that when there's a lot more relevant stuff you could be focusing on, right?
But before you worked with Ed, was vision like part of your understanding of things? Like how you used your eyes, how you picked up targets?
So not as such. I've been a spectacle wearer since I was probably 20, I guess.
Hmm.
And I could have had them earlier, but I kind of put it off. I thought it wasn't going to happen to me, but it definitely was. And I just did it at a local optician's, and it was good enough because it was better than not having glasses. So I was like, "Oh, this is cool. I can see." When I went
It
to Ed,
helps.
I was like, "That's actually what I should be seeing." You realize there's levels to stuff. I feel I've learned an enormous amount from Ed just by absorption from his information and working with joint customers that we've got about the visual system and eye dominance issues in particular. Um, but for me, the best thing that I've done with Ed personally is literally just getting a prescription that is perfectly set up to maximize what I can see for clay shooting. And when you've seen something in like the equivalent of Super HD, seeing it okay after that's pretty pants.
So I got to tell you too, my personal anecdotal story, real quick. So I've always thought I've had good eyesight. Always, my whole family wears glasses, but they really need it. And I was having dinner, and a pro was sitting across from me talking to another pro about how he's getting his eyes checked, and I didn't realize that he gets his eyes checked because he doesn't wear glasses. And I said, "Oh, so you get your eyes checked, right?" He goes, "I get my eyes checked regularly." I'm like, but you don't wear glasses? He goes, no, I don't wear glasses. He goes, but your eyes can deteriorate. He's like, you never had an eye exam? I'm like, I've never had an eye exam. He goes, you should probably get your eyes checked. So I go get checked. And long story short, I found out I have astigmatism, and it affects my left eye and how the light comes in, and et cetera, et cetera. And again, I could see 40, 50 yards, I could see clearly, but I didn't realize the definition I was missing by not having
Yeah,
it corrected. And when I had it corrected, it was like a complete game changer for me in terms of clarity and a distance, more importantly, a distance. So,
yeah,
um,
and interestingly, so the when I went to see Ed, I was already shooting. I was at the time I was shooting very well. I think the week before I went to see Ed, I'd shot a 98 or something on a pretty good course. So I was like, my eyes are fine. I'm good with this. And I went to see Ed, and obviously they could have been better. And I went back, and I was actually working. It was at the shoot I shot was at Sporting Targets, one of my regular venues. And I was coaching there the next week, and there was a couple of the stations on, one of which was a rabbit. And I'd straightened and ran the station, so it didn't cause a problem as such. But I saw the target, and I was like, oh, they've turned it in. They've changed the birds. And then I saw where all the patches had been shot, and I was like, well, they haven't, because that's obviously where it's been. And the difference for me was just the absolute crispness of seeing a rabbit target. It was a black rabbit at probably 35, 40 yards, but I could see just it crisply. I was like, right,
Right.
okay, that's the difference. And you could argue I didn't miss one, so it didn't cause a problem. However, now you've seen it properly, do you want to go back to seeing it okay? No.
Yeah, so that's a good, interesting point you bring up because this is the transition that I went through was to your point. I was shooting well even without glasses, just wearing regular shooting glasses. But then the Christmas changed, and it took a little bit of an adjustment. Is that a thing, or am I imagining
Yeah.
that? Because
So
I
when
feel
I
like the
when I
targets were bigger before, and now they're
yep.
smaller because there was more detail there.
So I found when I could see the birds better, my scores went down for a few weeks. And that was, I think, my lead pictures, my perception of lead pictures looked different because suddenly my brain was saying the target's closer. It doesn't need so much doing with it. And it wasn't closer. I was seeing it better.
Right.
Um, and my hold points might have needed changing slightly because I was seeing the target earlier. So then whatever method I was shooting, I needed to adjust my hold points accordingly. And that takes a little bit of time, and that's completely normal. So sometimes, again, fixing a problem short term, it makes it look worse, but you're not in it for the short term. You're in it for the long term. What happens in 6 months and 6 years rather than what happens in six shots.
Right. Do you take any like training drills, techniques just for your eyes specifically after you've learned what you learned from Ed? Is there anything that you could share with us that you do with your eyes to help them?
So I don't, and the reason for that is part of the exam that Ed does is he'll give you a list of any deficiencies that you've got, so like muscular imbalances and stuff like that. Fortunately, although I have got astigmatism in both eyes, like yourself, I don't have any muscular imbalances, and the muscular imbalances can be like any muscle. You can work it and you can develop it better. So if one part of your eye, sorry, is less functional than the other, and it's a muscular thing, there are certain exercises that Ed can give you to redress that balance. Now, in my case, nothing was particularly out of balance other than the fact my eyes are the wrong shape. So there wasn't anything that I needed to do as such. But there are plenty of instances where people can have what they perceive to be an eye dominance issue, and it's not necessarily an eye dominance issue, or it can be an eye dominance issue that's brought on by a muscular imbalance. That can then be dealt with by giving him sort of structured eye muscle training.
Hmm.
Then that obviously is a fantastic thing. Um, if you don't need it, I don't personally do anything. One of the things I try and avoid doing from a coaching perspective is, which works for me because I have to drive to the range, I won't do a lot of computer work like close to coaching because I find if I'm doing a lot of stuff on my phone or a lot of stuff like emails and bits and pieces on a computer and focusing in real close, I find it harder for my eyes to just out at distance. So I mean my day normally involves a 45-minute drive to the range and half an hour of having breakfast and getting myself together in the morning. So by the time I get to the range, my eyes are used to working at distance. But if you're somebody, and I've got a few customers who obviously do work inside, work on computers a lot, that can be a big thing for them, not just going straight from the office or straight from doing work to going and shooting, making sure they've got time to let their eyes readjust to working at distance, which is obviously what you're going to be doing for clay shooting. That's an important thing because it's pretty basic. But if you're not seeing stuff well, you're on the back foot.
It's interesting they say that. I used to have this theory that a lot of my friends that are shooters, they live in the Central Valley, which is more flatlands and larger distances. They can see the horizon wherever they're at. I'm usually in the
Yep.
city on a computer or in a suburban environment where I live,
Yep.
and so everything's much closer. You don't get to see the distance as much. And I used to argue the point that because some of those shooters are in places where the distances are longer, they're typically used to seeing at longer distances. That's a benefit to them in the long run versus someone who's in a city environment. where everything's up close and you can't look past maybe 100 yards. Um, but anyway, so that anyways, I'm just talking out loud about that. I guess that's more of a
Yeah,
comment
no,
than it is
I
anything
think
else.
also it's familiarity. So, for example, if you're a shooter that's like your local clubs are based shooting in the woods around trees a lot, you're naturally going to be more comfortable shooting in the woods and around trees. Then when you go to a range that's, for example, flat, relatively featureless, you might find your ability to judge distances and speeds a bit off. But it also works the other way. The guy who's been shooting in the open fields or out in the desert a lot then comes into shooting stuff in trees. That is unfamiliar to them, so they are inherently less good at it. And I think that's just where having an awareness of what you are and aren't good at, and don't shy away from the stuff you're not good at. If you struggle at a certain range, go and shoot there more often because you're
Yeah.
not going to get better at it by not doing it. I'm terrible at swimming. I've accepted that, and I try not to fall in deep water. But if I want to get better at swimming, I need to go and swim,
Yeah. Right.
and I'm not going to get better at swimming by not swimming.
Right.
So if you've got something that you know you're weak at, you kind of have to just put your big boy pants on and go for it. Short term it'll hurt, but long term it'll improve you.
Do you integrate aside from Ed helping out with it, but do you integrate vision science into your coaching now?
I say the bits that I know about, and I can only assume that the stuff that I've absorbed, sort of by proxy from Ed, is a tiny percentage of what there is to know.
Yeah.
I feel I've learned an enormous amount about certainly the eye dominant stuff and some general eye information, which I think has absolutely helped my coaching game. So seeing people with various degrees of cross dominance and how to offer solutions from that, combining with the technical side, I think has been very useful. Um, Ed's so incredibly well versed on his subject that I'm never going to be able to get a hundredth of the way to his level of knowledge. But some of the stuff that I've learned from Ed and we've done together has been very, very useful. And you can then see how that can be applied to help other shooters for sure. That's been a big, I think, advantage to me as a coach is
Hmm.
having access to an experience working with Ed and seeing how it can work from a joint shooting and visual perspective. That can be a really good thing. And we've got quite a lot of pretty high performing customers between the pair of us that have benefited from that. Sorry, including some pretty interesting non-competitive but interesting overseas customers, shall we say? That's
Oh, non-competitive shoes. I was going to ask you about
yeah,
that. Like,
yeah, just some people that have won't say who they are, but some pretty cool, important people who come over and go, right, we enjoy shooting, and they'll just say, right, can you spend some time with Ed, spend some time with me? We want to try and make the best of what we've got, and they don't care how they do it, and it's very very interesting to have that kind of approach and say, right, we're going to fly over on our private jet for the day. Come and see Ed. We're going to come spend a day with him, day with you, get some glasses, come back. Oh, you're going to need to come back and see us in a couple of weeks when the glasses are here. Fine, they'll fly in, and it's an interesting thing. There's some people that come in to see us that we wouldn't necessarily have thought would ever want to have anything to do with guys like us, but here we are.
yeah, no, that's great. You meet some interesting people in the sport, but I'm that's interesting that you said that they're non-competitors. It sounds like they just have the means and ability to learn more about their hobby and what they want to do.
It's
Uh,
something they enjoy doing, and if yeah, one of the things that they're not going to be limited by is finances or time. So
right.
they can just go, yeah, we need to do this. It's going to be, make us better, or it's going to be fun, or it's going to make us enjoy our hobby. Especially guys who spend, yeah, if they're spending £250,000, £500,000 shooting game birds each year. If you're not getting the most out of it, why not spend a few more dollars and come and
Right.
get
And
yourself seen
actually
to?
improve your game, right? Is it
Yeah,
really that much if you're going to be
oh,
shooting
the
that
man.
regularly?
It depends how much. It's like how much do you want to spend? I've probably got a few customers who certainly spend north of £250,000 a year on just shooting
Wow.
pheasants. Um, but it's like guns. It's like how expensive does a gun need to be? Well, how expensive do you want it to be?
Right, right, right.
Um,
Yeah.
there's you can go shooting pheasants for almost free by doing like what you guys do in the US. We do it in the UK called walked up shooting. You go walk around, tap up hedgerows, and you shoot what comes out, and that doesn't cost you very much at all. Or you can go on a big high bird driven day, and it can cost you, yeah, £4,000 plus all the expenses on top of that for a day out. Which one do you want to do? Well, Up to you.
I think the latter for me. I was watching Johnny's driven video recently, and I really enjoyed that. I thought it was a really cool experience. And I mean, it's not like, you're getting your money's worth, I think, right? For $4,000
And look,
pounds.
it's crazy expensive, right? And
Yeah,
it's the only person that can justify cost is the person that's spending the money. So
right.
it's whether you can justify spending that money and you feel you get the value from it. I love doing it. There's places that I enjoy shooting more. There's places I enjoy shooting less. There's scenarios I like more. There's scenarios I like less, and you learn that through doing it. But when you find out what you really like, um, if you can, and you've got the time and the means to do it, you're a long time dead, and you're only here once. So if you can and you like it, do it.
I think I'll want to try it. I got to ask you a dumb American question though. Do you have to
Yeah.
dress up in the gear, you know?
To an extent, so part of it's a tradition thing. So yeah, when you're doing the driven shooting, you'd be expected to wear a tie,
Okay.
and just look presentable. Do you have to have the full, +4 tweeds and matching jacket and everything? Absolutely not. You can wear a don't turn up in jeans and a trench coat. You can wear a pair
No
of
flip-flops,
yeah,
no
yeah, no, yeah. But
no
it's not
Castellani
as
vests with shorts.
yeah, you might get some. You might possibly get asked to leave a couple of them there, but I mean, look, to an extent, you're a paying customer, and within reason, look, you wear
Sure.
what you want. There's a level of expectation, saying it's almost like a respect to the game birds thing that you try, try. I don't wear a tie day to day, obviously, as you can see, but I actually quite enjoy it. It's a good opportunity for me to feel a bit smarter
Yeah.
and dress up nice once in a while, then so be it. But yeah, you don't need to go nuts. You could have a pair of cord trousers, a shirt, chuck a tie on, you're good to go.
Okay.
Yeah, you don't need to go crazy. You can go as far with it as you like or not. That's up to you.
Right on. I'd be remiss too if I didn't talk about Krieghoff here. I know you just got back from the factory. I'm super jealous. I want to go. And you're kind of known for not only knowing about Krieghoff, but shooting a Krieghoff K80. But what did you shoot anything before that, or was this the
Yeah,
gun that you've always
yeah.
been shooting?
No, I've shot Krieghoff for the vast majority of my sort of existence, if you like. I started off. My first gun was a 28-inch Beretta 686. I was about third or fourth hand when I got it, because obviously your first gun, you kind of don't really know what you're gonna do, so you just get something as cheap as you possibly can. And that was absolutely fine. I shot that for, I guess, probably 18 months or so until I realized that was something that I definitely wanted to do. Then got a Beretta 682 Gold, one of the old ones, the grey action ones, trap gun, which was a super super solid gun and did me very well. Um, and then I moved on to a Krieghoff, and this was at the time when, you
Ed,
didn't
sorry if you don't
see
mind me
many of them.
interrupting real quick. So how did you
Yeah, yeah.
move on? Did you go and get it specifically yourself? Were you introduced to it?
There weren't many of them around at the time. There was. It's not like now where thankfully they're a fantastic product, and it seems like everybody's got one, which is great. But you didn't see very many. There was only the K80, like the equivalent of the sporting setup, so the split barrel gun, very fixed sort of stock dimensions. So there weren't the options available now. But there was just something, I don't know, there was something about it that just drew. I like the look of them. Just drew me to them. I got the opportunity to get like a discounted one through a retailer, relatively local retailer. And I think this would have been probably 2000, 2001, or maybe
Okay.
2001, 2002, that kind of time. And just built the relationship up from there, and shot the gun and really enjoyed it. It was a quite a heavy gun at the time. All Krieghoffs were heavy. This is where the sort of the myth of Krieghoffs, they're a big heavy gun. They do this, they do that. Back in the day, that was very much the case. They were pretty chunky bits of kit, but that suited me. I liked a heavy gun. It kind of slowed me down a little bit. It suited my style of shooting, of just parking out in front of stuff and making slow moves into targets. And yeah, just built up the relationship with the guys there, Alan Rohn, Krieghoff UK, and the guys in Germany, Phil, Ralph, all the guys over there, and just I can't speak highly enough about the guns, obviously, but the people is just as big a part of it for me. I think it's like a
Yeah.
family. Really, really cool
No,
product.
it
And
seems
you
like a
obviously
really
got the
good.
guys in the States as well. You've got Kemble. I know you got your gun from Kemble, who's a really good friend of mine, and they're a great bunch. And obviously, I have Pam and Michael. I think we've just got rid of Alamo. I spent some time with those guys, and yeah, I think it's wherever you are, it seems to be that the level of service that you get with the guns is second to none, and they really look after people. So yeah, got a lot of time for them.
No, they're great. And I got my Katie from Kemble and Rollins, and they spent a lot of time with me on it because I was making a switch from a gun that I really liked, but I just
Yeah.
wanted to try something different, to be honest. And I've been happy with it so far. Was there a specific moment when you were competing with it that the Katie really stood out for you? Like, did did you feel like it gave you an edge?
So I've always absolutely loved the gun. I mean, it's just touch wood. It's never gone wrong, which is great. Um, Look, there's loads of fantastic guns out there. Okay, I think one of the things that I would feel it gave me, it's like the placebo effect. It's you feel that you have got the best piece of kit for you. So whether it's a physical thing or not, the placebo effect is still an effect. So if you think it's giving you a marginal gain, it's giving you a marginal gain. One of the things it gave me, other than great enjoyment of owning it and shooting it, was the confidence that in my mind I had the best piece of kit for me and I have the best backup for me. And when you're working with very fine margins, you look at any of the big shoots now, you look at the incredibly tight margins that people are working with. If you can use part of that to give you a 1% potential advantage, 1% is going to be the difference between potentially winning and coming second or third.
Yeah.
So technically, no, other than the fact that it's genuinely never let me down. And considering, the years I've shot them and I'm not a particularly careful guy with stuff. I don't, other than if it gets wet, I clean it. That's about it. Um, yeah, I think it has given me something, whether that's a mental thing or whether it's a technical thing, I don't know. But I still stand by that. I think they're the best gun out there, and I think they're the best service as well.
Yeah. No, I appreciate your honesty and candor on that too. And even you mentioning the placebo effect too, because to your point, a lot of the guns are good guns, but you're searching for that 1% piece that puts you over the edge, that makes you feel confident, makes you feel like you've got the right tool for the job, and that gives you the confidence that you need to go in. And when you're competing at the level that you were competing at the highest level against some of the best shooters in the world, you need every little bit of confidence to do
Yeah,
that.
yeah. If you think you shoot better with red shells than blue shells, great,
Yeah.
shoot red shells. It's as simple as that. If there's no physical difference between them, but in your mind, I definitely shoot better with the red ones. Great, shoot them. You think you shoot better with a certain type of choke. Great, do it. In real terms, is it actually making any difference to your performance? Almost certainly not. But
Yeah.
if it gives you that little bit of confidence in your systems and your process to take one more thing off the table, good for you.
Can I ask you your more personal thing about your gun? How's your gun set up? Do you shoot flat? Do you shoot a little bit of a higher shooting gun?
I see a load of rib. I see a load of rib on almost any gun that I set up. I don't feel it shoots high as such, but I've always seen so much rib. I've kind of got used to that picture and where it shoots. Um,
So sorry, just
I
to
would
clarify,
say,
you said you see a
yeah.
lower rib, like a flat rib, or do
So
you see
sorry,
a
no, no.
ramp?
So I see a load of rib. So I'm kind of up here.
Okay.
Um, and I've always shot with a very high stock gun, and I think I prefer the visual, being able to see around the gun. I use the rib as a reference a lot. I know people say I don't look at the gun, but I absolutely use it as a marker in my periphery. And I think being above it actually helps me to use. That's kind of like a pointing aid.
Yeah.
Um, some targets less so, some targets more so, but it's for sure it's there. I would say it's certainly set on the higher side. I'm not a massive pattern board guy. Because I'm terrible at shooting them, which is number one. And I think it can start to put shit in your head that doesn't need to be there. I mean, for me, if I
Oh,
want to
I've
if I
been
want to
there.
test
I've been there.
if I want
Trust
to
me, I
test my
know.
point of impact, I'll have a 15-yard trap bird and a 15-yard incomer. And if they're smoking, it's good. And if
Yep.
they're not, it's not.
Totally.
I could shoot 10 rounds at a pattern board, and you'd think 10 different people had shot at it and nine of them were blind.
Yeah.
It's terrible. So I tend to stay away from that unless it's to like if I'm looking at a hunting choke load combo, in which case I'll almost certainly shoot off a sandbag because I am just
Yeah,
I'm
because
beyond
the
that.
pattern board is really for point of aim versus point of impact, right?
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I trust, like for example, with Krieghoff, I've never touched the hanger system on any of my guns. They come out of the factory. Those guys set them up to shoot in the right place. As far as I'm concerned, you guys set the barrels up and I'll shoot them.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
I don't get super
Is
involved in
there
that
a
side of
direct
stuff.
setting for it? I'm curious now because they do have hangers like Kohler does, and I know with Kohler you can adjust. And again, this is where I probably screwed myself up, over adjusting and tweaking and changing and pattern boarding and just over worrying about things I probably shouldn't have. But what is it? What does Krieghoff set it at? Is it just flat or
I think they pretty much set them at 60-40.
okay?
But so what people sometimes make the mistake of is they'll shoot their buddy's gun and they go, "Oh, you've got a number 4 hanger. Oh, I've got a number 5. I'll put a number 4 on." Well, it came out the factory with a number 5 because that's what it needed to make it shoot to the right place. So because their barrels are, the K80 barrels are separate and they've got the hanger at the front, the guys at the factory will put the correct or they'll put the hanger on that gets the point of impact to where it should be.
I see.
So if that you might have two guns that have a one has a number 5, one has a number 4, and they both shoot perfectly 60-40. The problem comes where a guy goes, "Oh, I see you've got a number whatever on," and then they start messing around. "Oh, I need one of those." The gun comes out the factory good. Leave leave them
Yeah,
to it.
I
You
think
worry
you're
about the
100%
sight
right
picture.
about this.
Yeah,
People
you learn about
overthink.
the sight picture you want.
Yeah, that's the big takeaway from talking to you and then also Derek as well. It's really the sight picture that you want that you adjust for, right?
Yes,
Not the
correct.
change in the hangers and the BS and all that. This is stuff that you learn over time and you realize after you've been through it yourself or done it. And I've spent so much time tweaking and changing my guns in the past. And at the end of the day, it's the sight picture that you want. Unfortunately for me, switching to the K80, it's a great sight picture for me. I tend to sit up on the gun like you a little bit, where I'm not
Yep.
buried into it, but it's just a light touch that I put, and I'm
Yeah, and
looking out.
that slightly raised rib just suits that really, really nicely, I think.
Yeah. So I shoot the parkour though, so it's flat.
Okay, yep.
Um,
Fine. So I find that because I sort of almost float my head a little bit. I
yeah,
like the slightly raised. I've actually the last probably 6 months or so I've put a set of Pro Sport barrels on because I've got all sorts of stuff stuck in the safe. And I like now because I don't shoot a great deal, I just kind of play around with stuff. And I really, really like that more head up position that I can get from the raised rib. I've not shot, I think I shot one play shoot with it last year. So pretty much each year now I just do one 120 target competition, which is the whole pro one. And I shot that last year and felt through accident or what, shot it pretty well. Liked it. Haven't honestly shot enough with it on clays to get a true feedback of whether it's the right gun for me. I did all of my sort of competitive shooting with the taper step rib K80 barrels.
I was going to ask you about
Um,
that. You shot a
yep,
step rib at it because is
yep.
it because you're more heads up?
So the story behind that is when I ordered one of my first Krieghoff I ever had was a 30 inch, and I wanted to make the change to a 32. And I spoke to Alan at the time, Alan Roan in the UK, and I said, right, I want the new one I'd like with 32-inch barrels. He said, there's a bit of an issue. Said the only 32-inch with the 12 to 8 mil rib we've got is with the step. He said you can get the other one, but there's going to be a weight of whatever it was. And obviously, being impatient, I'm like, doesn't matter. Send me the step one. Shot the step one, which to all intents and purposes is exactly the same dimensions as the normal K80 12 to 8 taper rib. It steps up as opposed to being a gradual ramp.
Right.
So your head position's the same. I think the theory behind it was for trap shooting that you can actually it allows you to look through the gun a little bit better
Oh, okay,
um,
I see. I was going to ask you.
from a
Yeah.
theory perspective.
I know a lot of
Pure the reason,
pigeon shooters and trap shooters with step rib.
yeah.
And my
Um,
initial Benelli Super Sport Performance shop was also a step rib.
okay. And for me, the only reason I had the step rib is because that's what I could have when they were
Gotcha.
sending the gun out and I didn't want to wait. And because I got used to shooting it, I was like, oh, this looks nice. Would I have shot any different with a normal rib? Absolutely not. But that was what I shot for years. Had a big pair of Krieghoff steel, like 2-inch extended chokes. In the end, 'cause again, for me, the heavier the gun, the better. if Krieghoff could make a 14-pound gun, I'd shoot a 14-pound gun. Um,
Really?
and
Okay.
yeah, but it's personal preference.
What
You've
does
got
your guns
guys.
weigh now?
Honest answer is I wouldn't have a clue. Probably about 10 pounds, I guess.
Okay, wow.
Um, but you've got on that side of the coin, you've got guys like Mark Windsor who's shooting, always phenomenally well, super, super consistent. He shoots the lightweight parkour's barrel, so the original parkour's barrel, incredibly well. You've got Martin Myers, who's an absolute just consistent machine of shooting. He shoots the K80.
Hmm.
I think Gebben shoots the pro rib, the raised rib, shoots that incredibly well. There's there's so many people using so many different specs. Again, it comes back to this whole thing of what's the right specification?
Yeah.
What's the
It's,
right
it's it's
specification
it's
for you?
subjective. It's individualistic. So yeah.
Yeah, it's like
I
asking what your
found for
favorite
me,
meal is.
a lighter gun while I'm adjusting to it. My Kohler weighed 9.5 pounds. Loved the gun. I still love the gun. I still have the gun. But I wanted to try something different because once you get set on a path, you kind of stick with it for a while, and that's fine.
Yep.
But as a student of the game myself, I've always just wanted to tweak and change and do different things. And I've been around a lot of people that have many different guns and been able to experiment with it. And I just recalled that I shot my Benelli pretty well for a beginner, and I like the ability to just point it and move it much better,
Yeah.
than a heavier gun. And so when I went to the parkour, everyone kept pushing me towards the parkour X because they thought of my shooting style and my Kohler being heavier. I'd prefer a little bit lighter, but in that parkour X realm. But when I picked up the parkour, I was surprised how much I liked it and how it complemented to how I use my eyes and how I move with the target. So while it's taken some adjustment for me, I'm actually shooting it really well, and I feel really comfortable with it now. So that I added two Krieghoff barrel weights, and now it's at 8.5 pounds.
Okay. And I think that what you've just said there is absolutely right. At the end of the day, you have to try different options.
Yeah,
You'll find out what you like. You'll also find out what you don't like.
yeah. I
And
just
that's
shot what I shot because I got it and I was able to afford it. But I
yeah,
didn't get a chance to experiment really. And then when I started experimenting, I realized you might actually like a lighter gun for your style.
yeah. And that's one of the things I don't think anyone can necessarily tell you. You can get encouraged in certain directions, but the acid test for you is going to be okay. Let's try this, this, and this, and see what works. And
Right.
sometimes what works isn't necessarily what you thought was going to work. But if you don't try it, you don't find out. And I think you'll learn just as much from the bad stuff as you do from the good stuff.
So you have a
So
lot of
you go
guns,
and you
by the
shoot.
way. I've watched your
Oh, I've got a lot
video
of
on,
got a lot of Krieghoffs.
yeah. Do
Yeah,
you switch it
everything
up
in
for
my
when you're going game versus, clays and
yeah. So because I now just don't do any clay shooting, there's no
yeah,
score involved. It kind of in my mind it doesn't matter. So I'll shoot my 20 gauge early season a lot of the time for pheasant shooting, pheasant and partridge. Um, I'll shoot the pro rib if I'm going to go and shoot some big loads, big heavy stuff on high birds. I shot a few days with the parkours last year, really enjoyed it. I'll sometimes I'll grab a couple of them and take them out and decide what I'm going to do on the day. But I just I enjoy having the nice bits of kit to enjoy and shoot. They all do a different job. If I had to just go out and if you said, right, you've got to go out next week and your job is to shoot the biggest score you possibly can, I'd still probably shoot the step rib K80 with the big heavy chokes in the front end and just
yeah,
go, well, that's what the muscle memory is most comfortable
right.
with. But I love shooting my 20 bore parkours more probably than anything. I've got beautiful 20 bore parkours. I've probably shot more rounds through that in at pheasants in the last year
They're
than
fun
I've
to
shot at
shoot.
clays in the last five. So that's from an enjoyment factor for me. That's right up there.
Right, right. You've been shooting for a long time, 27 years, I'm guessing, right? Because you're 40, started
Yep.
at 13. What are you most proud of? Obviously the World FITASC is a huge thing, but is it your personal titles or is it what your students have accomplished under your coaching? What would
Um,
you say is your, yeah,
I would say initially for sure it was winning the worlds, and that's still if you had to ask me about sort of one memory to tell someone about before you die, that'd be it
yeah,
because it was altogether it was just a really really cool experience.
yeah.
Including the night out afterwards with Ed, which was hilarious. But that's one we'll have to have a conversation off air for, I think. But I genuinely get more enjoyment now from seeing my guys and girls competing and doing well on be it the world, European, or just local stage.
Yeah.
Someone winning their class for the first time. I remember what that's like. And for them, that's as big as getting your first England badge or getting your first spot on Team USA or placing on a European or a world podium. It's relative to everyone's goals, right? So yeah, I love nothing more now than seeing people banging big scores at the majors, and having coached people to win things like world championships and Grand Prix and British titles and international stuff. That's great, but I'm just as happy to get a message off someone saying I've just shot my best registered score ever, because at the time that for them is their world championship or their England team place or whatever. It's all
Right.
as you go along, it gets different, and that really is the focus of what I do is trying to get people to do as good of things with a gun as they can. Um, where they go with it, that's kind of up to them. There's some people that want to push it all the way. There's some people that just want to go. I want to be better than I was last year. I want to be better than my buddies. All of that's cool for me. I enjoy doing it. It's a really
Yeah.
interesting mix.
No, that's awesome, man. I think you've kind of, having been someone who didn't grow up around it, didn't have family around it, and you didn't grow up on a gun club or a range or anything like that. I feel like you're doing it right, you know?
Yeah,
Um,
it feels good. And I wouldn't I wouldn't want to change. I wouldn't want to change what I do and how I do it now. I'm very happy with my setup. I get to do, like we said before, we sort of started doing this thing. I don't do as much traveling as I could do, and I'm happy with that because it's a time thing. I am going to be coming to the States. I'm actually coming to the States in a couple of weeks, but that's for a fishing trip,
oh, nice.
which is
Whereabouts?
something else. Down Florida Keys.
Okay.
I'm going there twice this year. Actually, I'm having kind of because I've turned 40 this year. I'm going to have like a 40th birthday year. So
Oh yeah.
we've done the hog shooting, me and Ed. I'm going with my buddy Rob to do some fishing in Isla Mirada for a week in May. I'm going back to Florida in August, September with girlfriend and mum and dad for another vacation. I'm going to be coaching at Orvis end of June. I'm going off to Holland in a couple of days for a week's coaching. Just
Are you
having
going to
said
do any
about not
coaching in the
wanting to,
U.S.? So at Orvis, I'm assuming you're doing some coaching.
yeah,
Can anyone
yeah.
join that or?
Yeah, so there's the Orvis, I think it's the Orvis Classic, which is on over a weekend where there's a new numerous sort of like guest instructors. I know Zach and Desi are going to be there. Travis Mears is going to be there. There's a whole host of guys coming, being part of that. And then I think on the back of that, I'm going to be there for I think 3 days one-to-one coaching. All of the bookings and stuff done through Orvis. So drop the guys at Orvis if anyone's interested in that. Um, but by the sound of it, it's going to be a pretty busy few days, I think. I've actually got some guys coming over from the States tomorrow. I've got a UK guy in the morning, and then two guys coming over from the States in the afternoon. And then yeah, so just having said about not doing any traveling, there's a load of traveling I'm doing this year. But generally speaking, no. And it's purely because it's not. I love coming to the States. And I'm now just in the process of finishing off a work visa to be able to come over and obviously do it
Right
properly
on.
because I don't want any issues with that.
If someone wanted to
Um,
come out to you out in England from anywhere else in the world, where do you typically hold your training events, if you will?
so my two grounds that I work out of are Sporting Targets, which is in Bedfordshire, and Grimsthorpe, which is in South Lincolnshire. Both of which are they're an hour and a quarter away from each other. They're both 45 minutes away from my house, so it's nice and central. A couple of hours outside of London, and those I think are two of the best training facilities in the country. And to be honest, the numbers, like we said earlier on, the numbers don't make sense for me to be flying all over the world because I've got zero cost on for me going out the door to these
Right.
two fantastic venues. If I fly to the States, you're instantly, in the hole for probably 4 grand for flights, accommodation, 2 days of travel that you're not being paid for, 2 days of jet lag that you're not being paid for. You can do it, but you have to price it up so aggressively that I completely understand. I just if I was a customer, I wouldn't want to pay it.
Right.
And I say,
Right.
look, for example, and the US has got some incredible instructors. You've got Anthony, you've got Zach, you've got Desi, you've got Wendell, you've got so many guys who are legit, really, really good instructors. I'm like, go and see them. Or if you want to, if you're dead set on spending some time with me, come to the UK.
Yeah.
And thankfully, there's plenty of guys and girls that do, which is good. I will always look at doing the odd trip here and there, but I don't want to. I've got too many time constraints with the other side of business and a couple of other bits and pieces that I do, and the fact that I want to have some quality of life
Sure.
alongside
Sure.
this.
Yeah,
I can't do
it makes
everything.
sense. I mean, at the end of the day, um, and I think with the coaching part of it too, people gravitate towards the person that they most resonate with and connect to. I'll actually be in England in June next year, and of the places I have listed to shoot, High Lodge, Sporting Targets is yours, Grimsthorpe, EJ Churchill, Owls Lodge,
Yep,
Bisley, Barbury, and
yep.
I might try to see if I could jump into a classic driven shoot if that's even possible. But those are the places that I've
June,
got listed
you
so
won't be able to
far.
do it. You won't be able to do it in June, but you will be able to do a simulated driven shoot in June. That'd be a cool
Okay.
thing to do.
Okay.
Yep,
Okay. Yeah. Right. Seasonal. Okay. When is the driven
yep.
season?
So if you want to shoot, you want to come over and shoot pheasants. Pheasants is what you would associate with English shooting. You obviously shoot partridges. Pheasants starts 1st of October.
Okay.
Um, I would come from late October into November. The weather will be less shit. Um, but that's about as good as we can say.
But
You
can you
know
shoot
that's
tournaments that same time too, or
you'll be able to shoot registered tournaments for sure. There won't be any of the majors. So for us, the competitive season kind of starts end of March loosely, and it'll run into September. It kind of normally finishes with the British Open, which is September. And then once you've got September out of the way, you're into game shooting season. However, if you come in the winter, there will still be just as many registered shoots. You can still shoot probably 3 days a week, registered tournaments, no problem.
that's amazing.
Um,
Yeah.
with the average entry will be 150 to 200, so it's still, and you'll be shooting against probably 10 national or ex-national champions and a couple of world champions at every single one.
Wow.
The
Okay.
level of competition is absolutely sick.
What is
But
that?
it's
So
great because
I'm in master class here. What would I be over there if I were to jump over
uh,
there
you'd
and
be in
see
you'd be in double you'd be in double A.
double A? Okay.
Yeah, you'd be in double A. So triple A is only valid in the majors. So like your weekday stuff and your Saturday Sunday regular stuff just goes up to double A. So double A absorbs it's the same double A as before, but it absorbs the guys from treble A. So yeah,
But you
it's
have
pretty
double
punchy.
A, A, B, C, right?
Yes, correct.
Aside from triple A. Okay. Interesting.
So I think I could be wrong, but I think you go into double A.
Okay. Okay. So Ed, what's next for you, man? Are you still chasing any goals, like either on the coaching side, or are you thinking about getting back into competition at some point, or what are
I've
the
got
next things for you?
Currently, I've got no plans or desires to do the competing thing. Just because again, from the a desire is probably number one because if without the desire to do it, you're going to be nowhere.
Right.
But also reality strikes, and I don't have the time to be able to commit to it. And until if it does get to a stage where you can earn a legit living from doing it, it might be a bit of a catalyst for me to say, I'd maybe consider having a go at it. But I think it's unlikely. I'm for sure going to carry on doing the coaching thing because I absolutely love it, and I would just like to get more national and world titles for shooters of mine. That's for sure the goal. But I'm very lucky to be in a position where I love my job. I'm doing it with really cool people in really cool places. Why would I want to not do this anymore? So
Right.
as far as I'm concerned, just keep grinding on. And yeah, it's nice. Yeah, it's nice to know that people enjoy what you do, and it's nice to know that what you do seems to work. And yeah, long may it continue, man. That's the plan for me.
Right, man. No, it's been great talking to you. I've really enjoyed it. I've enjoyed watching the videos of you as well, talking about it. I think you're a great communicator and ambassador for the sport. And I really appreciate your time today.
I appreciate it, and it's been an absolute pleasure. So thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, Ed.
All the best.
Take care.